Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event objectives for the Bare Bones event, in which the Skeletal Urska is added to the game. So this week we got a new mythic coming in on Fridays. This is the first Friday of the month. We also ended up finally getting the event calendar for the month of February, and unfortunately we don't have Taransworld anymore. We've gone through a lot of websites like that over the years between Gems of War database, Taransworld, a few others like that. But yeah, we don't really have a current replacement for it. Luckily, the devs have been posting, about the last year or so, they've been posting like the monthly recap before every single month. So at least we have that, if nothing else. So let's go over that. So as far as the month of February, we are getting quite a few interesting past pets on Wednesdays this week or this month. The first one, like in a few days from now, we are going to be getting the Campaign 1 pet. So of course, these were one of the paywalled pets back in the day, from Season 1. We're on, Season 22 now? And this was one of the paywall one from one of the past ones. Beyond that, we also have the Valentine's Day pet coming in as well. So definitely do not make sure to go and get that on 2 days before Valentine's Day, on next week's Wednesday, as it will only be available then. But yeah, I hope they do keep doing this, bringing back a bunch of the old cosmetic pets, because it's been a long while since we've gotten a lot of them rotating around. Some of them have never ever rotated. Like the past 18 seasons of campaign pets, I don't think I've ever rotated a single time yet. So hopefully they'll start bringing them around here and there so that we can end up getting them. Beyond that, the only other two pretty noteworthy things is we're probably getting the Guild War patch at some Tuesday this month. We don't really know which, but one of these Tuesdays is very, very likely to be related to it. And beyond that, we also have a 2-week-long event for that of the Kingdom rework. So we're getting one for Divining Fields. This, of course, is the location that has a ton of centaurs. So overall viability of centaurs might go up. Right now, there's only a few that are particularly noteworthy. Main ones come to mind are Centurion with his Devour and Wild cards. Pretty good with skull spam things like Zolgoth, as well as Wardbreaker, which is just a general overall kind of centaur damage option. But beyond that, it has a lot of really average options. So it'll be interesting to see if this actually makes any of them viable, or if they'll still remain as overall dead content. But that's a full rundown over there. I'll have a link in the description if you want to go and check this for yourself. Beyond that, yeah, we're going to be getting new Mythic this Friday, as we mentioned there. Journey event, of course, this week. Oh, yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to mention. Lunar Reflection. So, of course, we've had the last 2 weeks of the Lunar New Year's event for the Year of the Snake. And if you haven't used up any of your points, you still can for the rest of this week. Do make sure to do so before the end of the week. But keep in mind, you cannot earn any more points if you haven't already gotten them. So just make sure to cash out whatever you still have. With the main priorities being, at this point, probably to throw it all into the pet, so you can get the golden version or get as high upgraded as you can, as this armor you can easily get next year. This troop you'll be able to get in a couple months from now, just from standard drop table. And of course you can get a power orb whenever you want, though it is pretty cheap to end up getting it through the event. Anyways, let's go over all the teams, and then we'll go cycle through everything else. So, Journey event. This is a brown Urska restriction this week, so you're allowed to use any brown weapon, as well as Urskas that are specifically brown. This is very, very, very good week to end up building a team around Defiance. How you want to do so, keep in mind he does stack, so you can use 2 of them, technically 3 of them, if you really want to go all out and just do Ivor Longclaw into 3 of Defiances. You technically could. So what Defiance does is it gives a bunch of skills to all Urska allies when matching for an extra turn. And what does Ivor do? It is a boost ratio based on all the Urskas on your team. So you basically get a double Urska boost ratio, where this will be triggering every single time you extra turn, and this will be triggering based on your entire team being Urskas, which in most of these situations you will, as long as you're using Sentinel hero class, your entire team will be 4 times Urska in every single situation here. So you will be able to get a lot of value. Keep in mind you have to use this anyways in order to get your 3 times miles by having it upgraded. So you're kind of already going to have to be using this, so you're going to be building entirely around the Ivor Longclaw. So Ivor Longclaw with any amount of Defiance, going to be really, really solid any team. And that team we end up doing with Doomclaw, so we can get the Devour. But of course, if you need to go cheaper, you can go with other utility weapons. You can go with multiple Defiances, as we mentioned. I feel like 2 is kind of like the limit. You probably want to run like Tank Hero with whatever weapon you prefer in the brown category. Ivor Longclaw, because you have to, plus it's going to be your main carry regardless. And either singular or double Defiance, and offsetting it once, depending on what you kind of want to roll in there. You could either have double of him, roll in something else that you might have that might be able to help out the team a little bit, but otherwise, simply just going something super cheap with double Defiance, even triple Defiance, will get the job done, as simply just camping Ivor Longclaw and constantly getting the extra turn stats from this, either it being 4, 8, or 12, is going to be pretty much enough to just carry through the entirety of the event. As far as the Underworld is concerned, it is for that of the Weirwoods. Weirwoods, one of the most annoying places to end up doing it for as well. But as far as Weirwoods is concerned, it is a green-red restriction. So for this, we just kind of have an offset Tesla team. We're using a Tesla with its 50% mana start off a Holy Snake Astra, and just using Bog Strider Leprechaun to give it mana. Of course, you could use absolutely any team that you have for damage sources, just putting anything in between a Bog Strider and Leprechaun, and you'll get all the mana you ever need. In this case, we're just going down a Tesla route. For the higher rarity team, of course, we're doing something somewhat similar, just using Leprechaun to get everything going, Wand of Stars for the Curse and everything else that it has, as well as Bless and Mass Mana Accumulation, and then simply just using 2 insta-kills in the middle, both Zulgoth and Catherics, as in the green-red, we do have access to both of them. Purifaction is definitely the most annoying thing to end up doing for this place. The biggest gimmick with this Purifaction is every single thing has a chance to transform every single time you cast it, which is really annoying. You normally want to keep your Weirbear in first slot because it has a little bit of score reduction, and try not to cast it unless you absolutely need to. But every single thing here has a % chance that it'll transform into Torburn, and Torburn has a chance that it'll transform into everything else. So it's just a constant cycle of your team being something completely different. But as long as you have at least one Weirbear and at least 3 troops going into the final fight, you should be fine. But your entire team by then is going to look completely different than whatever you start with. So to some degree, it almost doesn't even matter what you start with for this faction. It just really matters that you try to keep as much of it alive, and having things like a little bit of score reduction up front early on and stuff like that can help with it. And then you kind of just spam all your damage sources and just hope that your team stays stable. It doesn't become randomly something really, really bad. Next, we have the Sentinel class. Sentinel class is any Urskas from Urskea. For this, we're just running a bunch of this little Spirit of Rage in order to give us red link, so that we can do it into a red weapon, either Summer's Fury, or in this case, of course, if you have it, Dawnbringer. As far as Underspire is concerned, this is just Urskea restriction, without the Urska part, which means you do get access to a couple other things that you might not have potentially run before. One of these, of course, being Enraged Karandera, as it is not Brown, nor an Urska. However, it is from Urskea, and this is the one that you end up getting with the Power Orbs. One of the few things that you use that Power Orb for. Those 8 Power Orbs end up giving you an Enraged Karandera at any point. But we're just using this with one of the Exploding Weapon from this place in order to feed the 2 bigger things, Doomclaw with its Devour, and then our Mass Scholar, and just doing that together with its Curse. And of course, since both of these have a pretty high mana cost, look at that, 35, and over here, 24. 24 is pretty standard, but 35 is really high. However, we do have the Wish Gem mechanic. I don't feel like I've utilized this guy too much, but of course with, what is that name? Lurk, and Dirk, whatever that guy's name was. That one Goblin. Obviously, if you want to do Wish Gem mechanic these days, you're generally using him. However, of course, we can't under this restriction. But what you can use is this guy that creates 1 Wish Gem every single turn. While not the greatest, it will get the job done, and you do have plenty of ways to go and destroy it. The main one being to go use your Cleaver, get the Explodes, and then that will trigger your Wish Gem. And then after you get your Wish Gem, you will hopefully have full mana Enraged Karandera, which also explodes because it ends up converting into Doomskull. So hopefully you just get all your mana back again and just kind of keep doing that over and over again. It's pretty much the whole game plan here. Devour with this, Mana Accumulate with this, do a bunch of damage with this, and have this full mana off of everything with the Wish Gems, with particularly your weapon and your Enraged Karandera popping the Wish Gems every single turn or every other turn. And that's pretty much the game plan here. A little bit riskier, as it does end up giving the enemy team a bunch of mana, but really, really high damage. The only one I can see being a little bit annoying is when you have to do the Doom fights in Underworld, as those do have immune to everything pretty much. However, even if something has Impervious, you do have access to Curse. So you will be able to Curse Devour almost every single thing, with the Dooms and Underworld being, or Underspire, I mean, being the only things that you kind of can't really counter. As far as the low rarity team, it's working out pretty well. We're using a somewhat similar team to before, but since we are allowed to use non-browns, we are using the Urskula, which is a 50% mana start to all Urskas, which includes your hero class, if that's as a Sentinel. So that will apply to your hero class as well. And we're basically just doing this in a somewhat similar Ivor Longclaw build, except we're not able to use some of the other utilities that we're able to use under Urska Brown, since these are only specifically from Urskea, but not specifically Urskas. So we're a little bit more limited in what you can end up synergizing with Ivor Longclaw, as you can't end up going with the Sentinel or anything like that. So we're kind of just going with the Legend here. This is double Legend, but keep in mind, they are in the event key drop table. This team also technically doesn't need them. Well, it will help to get things rolling a little bit quicker and having a little bit of AoE. You can put pretty much anything in first and second slot and just run the weapon in second and this thing in third. And as long as your full team is 4 times Urska, you should be fine, as the main thing that you're doing is spamming Ivor Longclaw and then using this for mana accumulation. It is just here to speed up the battle, and it's just here to get you mana start, which of course also speeds up the battle. You're not really ever casting this thing. It's more so for the 50% mana start across your entire team, so it doesn't take as long. And that is the full rundown. As this weekend, we only have a arena weekend, aka no event weekend this weekend. So, as far as Soulforge is concerned, I would say overall pretty skippable Soulforge. Nothing really worth going for. If you need King Mikhail, just get him in event keys. Don't bother going for him in Soulforge. It'd be a waste of diamonds. And everything else, pretty average, unless you need like whatever the dragon is here. But I would say very underwhelming Soulforge, at least on PC Mobile. As far as weapons, I would say nothing's really a must-have. However, you probably did see me mention on 2 of the teams or so, the Urska Cleaver. This is pretty good for a couple things this week, most notably Underspire. Explodes a bunch of brown grants a random status effect to Urska allies, and then summons a Urska troop. And keep in mind, this is Urska and not Urskaya. And I would say Urska is a little bit stronger than Urskaya, as the variety that you have within the Urska category is a little bit better than the Urskaya category. So if you were to go for like one or the other, this is probably the one that you do want to go for, and as well as the one that I showed for, I believe, both of the teams as well, or 3 of the teams, 2 of the teams, I think. But pretty useful. Not like the greatest exploding weapon in the game, but you'll definitely get some use out of it this week, if nothing else. Beyond that, of course, journey events. As far as the journey event is concerned, pretty standard. Just take whatever one is the highest miles. Make sure to not take too long, otherwise you will eventually get a point penalty if the battle goes on for too long. And you have to make sure that no troops die, otherwise you do get a point penalty for every single death as well. But if you're using Sentinel hero class in first slot, you should be pretty tanky. Not only does this hero class have a 40% score reduction and a chance to give a barrier to a random ally every single turn, but it also ends up giving you barrier every single time you take a brown. So this thing is pretty unkillable. 40% score reduction barrier every brown, and the ability to create even more barriers on top of that. And it even starts with barrier. If that wasn't already enough barrier, it is pretty tanky. Among one of the tankiest hero classes. Of course, there are things like entangle and stuff, which in some situations which can end up entangling a little bit better. But as far as just overall tankiness, this is pretty high up there. And for the longest time before, like, Elementalist was considered, as well as Monk to some degree, was considered the tankiest hero class in the game. And to this day, it is still among one of the tankiest. So, especially with Mountain Crusher, which creates a brown storm, dust storm, whenever you cast it. So you'll immediately be able to get even more brown onto the board, as you'll constantly have a bunch of browns coming in more than usual. So that's pretty much the whole premise here, to make sure that you don't end up dying. I didn't really explain it too much when I was going over the team, but yeah, it's very relevant to make sure you don't lose a little bit of score there. I believe you can get the score back just by resummoning, but normally it's better just to not die to begin with, and then just kind of damage them down with something quick, either spamming into an Ivor Longclaw team, or simply trying to hope for your Doomclaw Devours, assuming the enemy team can be devoured, of course. Otherwise, just going Ivor into a bunch of Defiance and just ramping up your stats until it kills out the entire enemy team. Just keep taking out the highest one every single time. So overall, pretty standard. Keep in mind, you can only get this troop from the pass this week, though you only need to get to tier 2 to get it, and tier 3 to get the weapon. So you don't really need to go too much beyond tier 3. I did go for tier 4 just to make the little upgrade a little bit cheaper. I was considering running double of it too. Keep in mind, you can go to tier 4, use 2 blue orbs, and then go 2 or 3 of them on your team. But due to Defiance existing, it is generally going to be better just to run Ivor with 2 Defiance than it will be to run 2 of it with 1 Defiance. It's actually better just to run double Defiance, so you ramp up even quicker, basically twice the speed, rather than running double of this. Even though that's a good strategy for a lot of other journey events, this particular journey event, due to Defiance, it is not actually needed this time around. You can still run it if you want. Beyond that, deals, as far as the weapon, pretty useless, but deals some damage to an enemy boosted by brown allies and Urskaya allies. Like many of these, this boost ratio is way too low later in the game. Honestly, even early in the game, you pretty much wouldn't even use this. It just doesn't do enough ratio to justify ever using a tribute trading. Beyond that, we did that. So yeah, still into week 2 campaign, still pretty early. Still plenty of time to do that. Purple campaign as well. Beyond that, what did we not go over? Oh yeah, the week. So Tuesday, we have ourselves the faction event for Werewoods. Wednesday, we have the troop from, or the pet from the very first campaign, from campaign 1. We're on campaign 22 right now. So if you haven't picked this up or haven't maxed it, yeah, you can do that this Wednesday. Thursday, we have Sentinel hero class, among one of the tankier hero classes in the game, though generally you run Elementalist instead in a lot of situations, or Monk, or a few others that are out there. It is still useful, but it's generally only really used in 4 times Urska or Urskaya teams. It's not really used too much as just a general hero class. You definitely can, but normally Elementalist is way more popular due to Freeze and Entangle just being quite a bit stronger than just simply just only tankiness, as Elementalist has both tankiness and additional utility, whereas this thing is pretty much just tanky, which is good, but there's a lot less utility to it compared to a few of the other tank hero classes, but it is really tanky. And if you're doing any kind of Sentinel, or if you're doing any kind of Urskaya team, which is very popular this week, given the restrictions, you will be using it quite a bit on weeks like this. But otherwise, it's very situational when you bring it out, though. Still a really good hero class. And then Friday, we have, of course, as we mentioned, we have Arena event, aka no event this weekend. Beyond that, event key drop table. So, of course, as we mentioned, it is a Urska event week. With that being said, it is a Urska drop table. So if we go over to the collection here, everything that you see here, except for the following, is in drop table. The main ones to note that are not in drop table include the 5 troops from Murwoods. Those are only from the faction, and you have to throw Chaos Shards to end up getting those. Beyond that, keep in mind, Ivor Longclaw is only from the faction shop, or not the faction shop, the Journey shop. So you can only get it for gems this week. You cannot get it in the event key drop table. And beyond that, the other one that you cannot get is Enraged Karendare. You can get normal Karendare, but not Enraged Karendare. Enraged Karendare is only from 8 power orbs in Soulforge, so you would need to end up doing that. And of course, we did just have an event where you could get one of them, so you're one step closer if you don't already have it. As far as things that are maybe worth getting, I would say it's mostly the Legends. Not only in being kind of pretty good for this week, and this is a standard AoE troop, this is a 50% mana start for all Urskas. But there are some situations where you do still use Theodorovich, like we mentioned with that one team. It's very situational now that we have Lurk, Dirk, and I keep forgetting his name. The Goblin that does Wish Gems. We have the Goblin that does Wish Gems now, so his viability overall is quite a bit weaker. His actual cast is kind of lame. He's carried almost entirely by what his final trade is. So, but there are situations where you do end up still using him, including this week, so might be worth picking up for that. As far as the Mythics, nothing really too noteworthy. They're pretty skippable. Doomclaw, while having Devourers and somewhat useful this week, is not really used as a Devourer. There are way better options out there if you're looking for a Devourer. This thing just does a bunch of damage and kind of has like a bleed, a terror mechanic, but overall just isn't worth justifying using him for how inconsistent he is. And normal Karendare does have some use cases, but generally are running Enraged Karendare a lot of times. Normal Karendare does have the benefit of having a lower mana cost, but there's a lot of ways around that these days between Wish Gems and just the 1.5 billion mana accumulation methods that there are these days. So him having a 9 higher mana cost, while somewhat annoying, is a lot more workaroundable these days compared to in the past. And they both already have a curse option, and there's just so many other ways to curse these days if you need a curse option. Obviously, Wand of Stars being one of the more noteworthy ones that end up doing it, but there are so many more compared to when these came out like 2-3 years ago. So they're a lot less viable in that regard, just because there's just so many less. Oh, so I just realized they still look exactly the same. I'm not sure why they never made them look different. It's kind of funny because the other one looks different, but they never made these two look different. Unless there is, and I just don't notice it. I'm pretty sure both of these look exactly the same, other than, you know, the rarity and everything else. But, you know, the actual visual of them, they never bothered making them different. That's kind of funny. Anyways, beyond that, what have we missed? What have we missed? I would say the troop. So we haven't gone over the troop yet. We have ourselves this little guy. He is unfortunately pretty weak, the Skeletal Urska. You can end up getting him from going into shop, going under the weekly event, and going all the way over here to the Skeletal Urska. If nothing else, you can go stock up on brown purple arcanes. But beyond that, this thing is pretty bad. It deals some damage to an enemy, a pretty standard amount, nothing really special, and then converts 6 gems of their color, mana color to skulls. So this is pretty inconsistent unless you're clicking on something that is a single color and it has like perfect alignment. Like let's say you're hitting a brown troop that is only brown. Like if you're hitting something that's like Mountain Crusher and there's only like 5 browns on the board, you will know for sure that all 5 of those will convert into a skull. So you'll know for sure if you have alignment or not. But if you're in a situation where you're not doing that, like you're hitting a mythic that has like 3 different colors and they're all scattered across the board, you'll have no clue if you actually get alignment or not. And it's going to be really inconsistent. I don't really see this thing being used compared to pretty much any other skull spammer in the game. Even things like common, like just normal skeleton instead of a Skeletal Urska. Just literally just this troop skeleton that's a common troop would do way better than this, as it has auto extra turn. It gets a little bit of armor for itself, even though it doesn't get to do damage to the enemy. And you get to still move afterwards after it creates its skulls. So this thing is just really weak compared to other options out there. And of course it has that useless decaying gem mechanic, which is a pretty reoccurring theme that we'll be seeing a lot during the season. In that a good like 80%, maybe even 90% of every single thing that ever comes in with decaying gem is probably not going to be worth using. It's a pretty much just a brown gem with a different name. The amount of armor reduction to slate in the game, even if it's working to help your team, is barely any to really make that much of an impact. Even if you have something like 10 of them on the board, 15 of them on the board, which is really unlikely, but even if you did, that is barely even enough to make an impact. Yeah, it does get to trigger every single turn on like bleed, which is like every other turn, but normally it's triggering on yourself. And even if you're trying to lower your armor for something like countering Tesla or counting like a Mang or something, like you're barely getting any value from it. I can see this being pretty effective early on in the game, some of the ones that will be coming out through this later in the season, but a lot of the options we've had so far have been pretty lackluster with the decaying gem, but we'll have to wait and see if we get anything later down the line. But anyways, guys, it's a full rundown on everything. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I'll catch you guys later. Goodbye, everyone, and thanks for watching.